Hello and welcome you crazy people, my name is Jane. In this video I'm going to make possibly a very bold statement, but I will try and back it up. I believe that Games Workshop has deliberately oversaturated the skirmish wargaming market. Now that's full stop. Then this is a bit of an opinion. I think maybe they did this to promote the bigger games, and maybe they did it in a way sort of bad to deliberately promote the bigger games. Yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about. If you like this video, press like. That's if you like me making this subject. You don't have to agree with me to press like. And if you're not subscribed, you're interested in wargaming as a whole, please do. So I want to make a point. When I say skirmish wargaming, I don't mean like Star Wars Legion skirmish mode. Just skirmish wargaming is like a couple of handful of models on the table in a game that's relatively short. Yeah, because I appreciate there are still up and coming skirmish games. Like I think I would count Super Fantasy Brawl, something I'm personally interested in, as like a skirmish kind of game. So I don't think skirmish games are going away. I don't think Games Workshop has killed them off. I just think that maybe they deliberately didn't try and have a really popular one to channel people into the bigger games. Or that they were like, well, we'll release so many skirmish war games that if skirmish wargaming is so popular, we can be like, hey, come and check out our skirmish war games. I just think it makes sense. So I'm not saying it's a bad move by Games Workshop or anything like that. So let's talk about evidence. Evidence is a stupid phrase in this. Now I may have some time scales completely off here, so we'll just go through what I believe is like the history of Games Workshop sort of semi-releases, sort of. Now I know that, you know, Games Workshop had more time in the past, and I'm sure like Blood Bowl you could even count, but I'm going to be looking at probably like a timeline essentially since the first game. Yeah, I'm not trying to like write a thesis here or properly create an essay, so don't hate me if you disagree with me. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I say a couple of years ago, I think it might have been like 8 years ago now, I'm not 100% certain, it was quite a while back. Games Workshop did this like Shadow War Armageddon box set, which was basically 2 kill teams and a lot of terrain. And a lot of people think that they just made this to sell the terrain, but I think they were essentially testing the water and see what was going to happen, but they probably did also want to sell the terrain for sure. But yeah, this was like they had a skirmish rule set in it, I think. So that's one. That's the timeline we're starting, and I think that was sort of like a precursor to Necromunda. Again, if I've got the order of these wrong, like don't hate me. Necromunda is, well, Shadow War Armageddon, it was a one and done kind of thing. They've not really supported that properly in any way, shape, or form. Necromunda, on the other hand, it still gets new gangs. I think they're called. It still gets new gangs as of, you know, now. They're still releasing models and stuff like that, and to all intents and purposes it looks pretty decent. There was a bit of like problems with how they released the rules, because I think they released like a book, they released army books, and then they released a book that included all the army books. Whatever, I don't know too much about it, so don't hate me, but it still gets supported. So, but I'm saying they're not supporting it in a way that's like akin to one of their main games. They're not necessarily trying to push it. They're just sort of trying to satisfy the audience who likes it. They're not pushing new boundaries with it. But you could disagree with me. Either way, and plus my point isn't that they're badly supporting all of these. It's just that I think they may be badly supporting one specific one, Kill Team, specifically to try and push people to 40k, but you know, it is what it is. Then I think after that we probably had Warhammer Underworlds, and again this is a game that they are still supporting. I think Beastgrave was season 3, after Shadespire was the first one. I can't remember what the second one was. Was it Glass something? I can't remember. I can't remember, it's going to annoy me. But yeah, this is a reasonable game. I'm calling it a skirmish game, but it is obviously played on a hexagon board, a hex board. But definitely fits into the handful of models, short games, perfect. And it still gets warbands as of today, kind of thing. So, and they're doing like a kids version of it, so it is supported. And if anything, I think this was probably one of my, I've not even played this, but I say one of my favorites. It was the ones that tempted me the most to, that I could see myself playing a lot. Now again, this one had a bit of a problem with sales model. Sales model is a bit of a problem, I think, for a lot of GW's products. But this was, you buy a warband and you're supposed to have everything. However, it did sort of have like a deck building mode where, well, a deck building element where really you had to have some extra warbands to have all of the cards. Now I think they've essentially done away with that, or it's a lot reduced now, and you can even do like pre-built decks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think they're just learning lessons, but it wasn't like they just knocked it out of the park from the off, but it was pretty damn popular. Then we come to the one where I'm really talking about, because I think there's an article about Combat Patrol, which is Games Workshop's 500 points skirmishy kind of full 40k. It's full 40k rules, but designed around 500 points, which is going to be like less models. Still quite not like. I mean, I say skirmish. I think they did an article today, and I think I counted it's still like 20, 30 models. So can you really call that skirmish? I don't know. But anyway, Kill Team, they did that. I think this is about 3 years old now. But the release schedule for this was, for me, crazy. And it's the thing that put me off. So it came out in like July. And then within a year, we had pretty much all of the most of the products that had been released for it. So we had Commanders. Then I think it was Arena. And then Elite, right? And there was also Rogue Traders very soon after that. And that sort of sales model just put me right off the game. I didn't want new expansions that were changing the game before I'd even got a handle on the actual game. So for me, that was a bit meh. And then since then, I think we've had maybe an updated starter box because the first one sold out and they never reprinted it, and maybe a Kill Team annual. There has been some cards which I know like Goss Half Dead was kicking off about. When I say kicking off about, I didn't watch the video, but he was saying it's not that great of a new release. But yeah, so they like threw everything at Kill Team I think for about a year, and then it feels like it's been pretty much sidelined. Yes, it still gets rules in White Dwarf, etc., but it's not had proper support. Now, of all of these games, Kill Team probably was the most popular out of what we're going to be looking at, right? It's more popular than Warhammer Underworlds, even though Warhammer Underworlds are probably the second most popular. Then more popular than Necromunda. It's because it's set in the 40k universe. It's like, this is our main game. Now the sales model is we're going to give you rules for your factions, and your existing models are perfectly fine. If you want a new faction, you just go and buy the models for that, and then you buy like either whatever book has the rules in for it, basically. But yeah, or White Dwarfs, which I don't personally like, but it is what it is. So I think Kill Team really is like, they may have recently deliberately not been releasing that much for it to try and channel people into 40k and the Combat Patrol. And the Combat Patrol is 2 Kill Team size boards. So it's like, they've said they're going to do more kill zones, but now they're doing kill zones, but probably with an ulterior motive of play 500 point Combat Patrol. So, I mean, I don't want to give them too much credit for stuff like that. But, yeah, I don't think anybody would say they really consistently have supported Kill Team very well. It felt like they front-ended it, for sure. Whether or not you agree with me, it's fine. And then, more recently, like last year, we had Warcry. And Warcry was released last year. And then it had a Book of Beasts and Mercenaries, which I was a little bit frustrated with Warcry because it sort of set itself up to have this proper match play stuff, and then it just sort of seemingly disintegrated a little bit. But Warcry had the Beast and Mercenaries book, then it had an annual, which is a bit weird. Kill Teams had an annual as well. An annual considering it hadn't really been out that long. All of the initial factions that weren't the war bands that you could buy had like one-off runs of cards, and then eventually they released that stuff in the annual, and then they have now done they've done a different run of different faction cards. So like Stormcast Eternal's a different kind of warband, or whatever you want to call it. Just a confusing sales model. Like, just confusing. Just, it might be decent and people who like it might really like it, but I don't feel like they've ever like properly done it well. And yeah, so the game I was mentioning at the start is Super Fantasy Brawl. This is just it's a hex-based kind of game, but the Kickstarter's done, the models are due out soonish, I'm not sure when. And yeah, I just wanted to give examples that Skirmish Wargaming isn't dead. It's just, I think, it's not really took off the way I thought it might have taken off Skirmish Wargaming, and I put the blame for that specifically to Games Workshop. One way or another, I blame Games Workshop. So, yeah, I feel like they've oversaturated that specific area. I don't necessarily blame them. When I say they oversaturated it, I don't blame them for doing it. They're obviously trying to make money. I don't think that is a problem at all. But that really meant that the competition could never properly get in there. Like, Marvel's Crisis Protocol has done reasonably well, but it's not necessarily setting the world on fire. I doubt Super Fantasy Brawl will set the world on fire. Unless you're Games Workshop, I'm not really sure you are going to be that dominating force. But it feels like Games Workshop inadvertently or deliberately just was like, well, we're going to have a lot of skirmish games, and you can pick and choose and play. You can play in the 40k universe. You can play in the Warcry Age of Sigmar universe. You can play Necromunda. We know you are Necromunda's like nostalgia, guys. We're gonna have this warband competitive mode, and then it sort of feels like they did a lot of games, but nothing really particularly very deep, if that makes sense. Like if we compare this to like Star Wars X-Wing, X-Wing gets a lot of releases for sure, but it's one game that's getting all of those releases, and it feels like it's properly supported. And I think X-Wing might even be a reason how this came about. I think they saw the popularity of X-Wing and thought, well, we'll set stuff in motion that if the Skirmish coffee table games ever kicks off, we're in a position to be in that sphere. And yeah, I think X-Wing is an example of that. I'm not claiming X-Wing invented that, obviously. Games like Frostgrave have come along since then, or even might have been before then. I'm not 100% sure about Frostgrave. It's one of those games I have no idea when it actually came out. What's the card game? Gaslands. These games have come out and found little niches for sure, and I think Mordheim has been in the past, and Necromunda and Blood Bowl. They've always had the games that don't involve a shed ton of models, but it felt like in the last 5 to 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is, they've just sort of oversaturated it with several games. And I think if I was gonna, the one where I look at it where they've deliberately possibly not supported it enough to promote the bigger game would have to be Kill Team. Like I just don't think they've supported that in enough recently in the last year. I don't think they've supported it enough, and 2, I don't think they've supported it in the right way. They feel like they threw everything at the start where they could have spread everything out by 6 months, and I think that for me, they were like, well, we don't want it to ever run into possibly hurting Warhammer 40k's sales in whatever way. We don't want people to be put off the full game, because obviously the reason I'm even making the statement is if people are playing the bigger games instead of the smaller games, Games Workshop makes more money because they sell more models. Like it's literally as simple as that. That's what I'm saying. So they had an invested interest in being in the skirmish market because they didn't want to get overtaken by a game like X-Wing coming out of nowhere and blasting them. Marvel's Crisis Protocol could have done that. Like a Marvel skirmish game could have done that maybe 8 years ago, or what have you. So they had an invested interest to be in the market, but they also had an invested interest to point you towards the bigger games because they're going to make money there. Now, so that's it. They wanted to be in the skirmish market games, but they also didn't really want to be there because they want you to play their bigger games. So I think their sales releases have shown how they've achieved that. Basically, I think they've achieved it incredibly well and very smart. Because nobody really even thinks about it. There's not many people who are like, they deliberately didn't release stuff for Kill Team to get to 40k, or they oversaturated them. But I think like it's hard to prove, because they may just have been trying to do these games and trying to support them and then changing their minds, or just happy with the slow amount of releases for Necromunda and being content. But for me, I can't help but feel like there's a deliberate thing underneath, and Games Workshop's like massive financial success sort of possibly implies it whatever they're doing has worked. So that's it, a bit of a conspiracy theory, very long video for conspiracy theory, but like, don't hate me, guys. Like, it's just an opinion. I'm not saying whatever Games Workshop did is morally incorrect or illegal anyway or anything like that. I'm just saying you can see the direct thing is that they needed to be in the skirmish market, but they don't really want you to play skirmish games. They want you to play the bigger games. That's it. And I think they've achieved it pretty well. One way or another, I think they achieved it. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.